Hi everyone, it's Mr. Smith, and today for Global History, I'll be presenting to you on the Persian Empire. All right, so you're just gonna have to deal with something here about this Persia video, which is the reality is that I have so many meetings and we have basketball practice after school. You're just gonna have to listen to me ramble on about Persia, but that's all right because we've got team trivia tomorrow. And I know the presidential debates are tonight too, so there's a lot happening, so watch the video, enjoy. But before we do that, I got a couple of surprises. So basketball started up earlier this week. We've got practice today. I was excited. I got new kicks for the season. I gotta have some heat on my feet when it comes to coaching, not just in the classroom or when I'm walking around DC or wherever. So take a look, a little unboxing here. I got the new Hardens. You have to let me know what you guys think. I just thought I'd show this off because why not? It's fun. Fresh kicks aren't just what I was excited about yesterday. I also got out and played golf. And I know a lot of you sophomores love the golf. I'm ready, man. I'm ready to take on any challengers. And in the meantime, before you underestimate my skills and you say, oh, he's old, he's got that beard, he's short, take a look here at the swing. I think this is 7th hole yesterday, teeing off. So again, I'm serious. I'm ready for all challengers when it comes to golf, man. I'm ready to go. You name the place, I'll be there. And not only do I have my golf skills going right now, but check out these dance moves.
Fishing pole, grill it in. Work, hold on. It's me and my friends.
Go, bud.
Work, you know what I'm saying? Walk in, walk out, let's go. Work. Hey, walk it out, walk it out. Work, cha-cha, cha-cha. Work,
Okay, and so when it comes to dancing, look, I've learned this. If you can't laugh at yourself, then you're not having fun. So let's talk business though, Persia. And we're gonna start with the term empire. This is the first time all year we've introduced the term empire. And in G-Sprite, empire would fit under the category of political because it defines how the government rules over a group of people. But what separates an empire from any of the other terms we've learned so far, like city-state or dynasty, an empire is when one government rules over a large, or even sometimes it can be a smaller territory, but it's when an empire and an empire is when a government rules over a noticeable amount of territory that goes beyond their home base. So let's say, for example, the United States were to conquer territories in Asia. Like at one point, we took over the Philippines. The Philippines would be brought into the so-called American Empire. It's when you go out of your home base and you conquer or you take over or you bring territories into your government. And now that home-based government rules from not just their home base and the territory where their peoples, their civilization developed, but it also extends to much further and goes beyond the home territory. And in world history, one of the first and most important empires is Persia. For a little geography lesson, Persia is situated in the region of the Middle East. It's just outside of ancient Mesopotamia, although it's very close in proximity to ancient Mesopotamia. And in modern day terms, Persia is home to the country of Iran. That's one of the most important points I want to strike here early on. Persia is what we consider today modern day Iran. In fact, still to this day, a lot of Iranians and people around the world refer to Iran as still Persia or Persian culture. But Iran as a country didn't develop until much later, but throughout world history, what we call today Iran was known as Persia. Now, the roots of the Persian Empire can be traced all the way back to the 6th century BCE. So we're talking the 700s BCE. And the Persian Empire lasted all the way, get ready for this, all the way until the 1900s. So this is one of the longest lasting empires in world history. And at one point, Persia would expand, and it was the largest empire in the history of the world. So we've got a lot of great things to unpack here about Persia. Now, the name to always associate with the Persian Empire, and you would put this under political in G-Sprite, is Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great is considered to be the prototype emperor, someone who rules over a large territory under one government control. And Cyrus the Great, man, this guy was ahead of his time. He was the ruler of the Persian Empire. He founded the empire, in fact. He was the founder around 550 BCE. And under Cyrus the Great, the Persian Empire expanded all the way across the Middle East into parts of Europe, including Greece, and all the way as far east as parts of India and the Indus River Valley. Cyrus did this through a combination of strategies that we'll talk about. And I'm going to introduce here a saying that you'll hear me repeat a lot this year. Empires are built by the sword. Empires are not built through handshakes and hugs. You don't walk around to your neighboring territories and shake their hands and say, "Hi, we're here to conquer you." Rather, war has been what many empires have been built upon. And for the Persian Empire to expand as far east as India and as far west as sections of modern-day Greece, you have to admit and recognize that the Persian Empire did this through force. It conquered territories and then brought them under the control of their main government. And Cyrus was the great expander. And that's where he gets that nickname, Cyrus the Great. Not the only great in world history, by the way, that we'll talk about. Now, Cyrus was able to conquer and build himself a massive empire through various strategies. The first was just, as we already talked about, sheer military prowess. But what helped the Persian Empire grow to such a powerful military is that they were able to invent or develop a new technology that helped their military in battle, and that's iron. Under Cyrus the Great, Persia sort of took from the Bronze Age and started charting a course towards moving towards the next evolution in metallurgy, so from bronze to iron. And this really put Persia on the map as being a center of military power, but also technological advancement. And under Cyrus, not only was the technology sort of booming, but the Persian Empire began to strike and launch out attacks all over Mesopotamia. It moved into parts of Egypt as well. And Cyrus, he was more than just a conqueror. In fact, Cyrus was well known as being someone who you would consider was a bit benevolent, meaning he had a kind-hearted spirit about him. I don't want you just to lump into a category as being this ruthless conqueror. Under Cyrus, he began to unify his empire and bring various conquered peoples under the control of the Persians. Now, granted, conquered peoples oftentimes faced the fate of slavery, and they faced the fate of being incorporated into the conquered the army, the conquering army. So sometimes, if you were the stronger males were then brought forth into the army of the group that conquered them. But what Cyrus is really known for is he was seen at the time as a liberator of conquered people, meaning he actually gave conquered people to some degree their freedoms. And one of his greatest acts that he did as emperor of the mighty Persian Empire is that Cyrus created what was known as the Act of Toleration. And this is when he allowed conquered peoples to practice their religion. And one of those conquered peoples that Cyrus allowed to practice their religion were Jewish people. And I know we haven't talked about Judaism as a religion. We'll get into that more when we cover our religions. But Jewish people, or Hebrews, were a unique brand of Middle Easterners who practiced monotheism. And in an era when most cultures and civilizations practiced polytheism, the Hebrews, or Jewish people, were practicing monotheism. Cyrus, once he conquered territories that were under Jewish control and had a large Jewish population, Cyrus the Great went as far as allowing Judaism to continue. And that was a unique, truly unique characteristic of Cyrus the Great. Something else Cyrus is known for is the way that he orchestrated and built his government. Because the Persian Empire included so much territory, Cyrus came up with the idea, and future Persian emperors would mimic this technique. They would divide the empire into different sections. They called these satraps. And these satraps divided the empire into different sections. And then Cyrus would appoint different generals or different Persian leaders to control those sections. So although Cyrus was the big emperor, he had people that worked underneath him who would then rule over different sections of his empire, or different satraps. And these satraps were how the Persian Empire effectively ruled such a large portion of territory. Although one person had all the power, like Cyrus, he delegated the power out. And this was an innovation. You could put this under intellectual, perhaps in G-Sprite, or you could even put this more into political. That's probably where it better goes in your G-Sprite charts. But Cyrus, he was ahead of his time. And so he developed this technique of dividing his power out. And we know a lot about Cyrus the Great thanks to recorded history, written history, secondary sources, even some primary sources. We're going to take a look at one tomorrow. But as Cyrus eventually gave way to what we all face in life is death, his legacy would live on in future emperors of the Persian Empire. And the fourth king or emperor of Persia is another name we have to know, Darius the Great. So Darius was the fourth Persian emperor after Cyrus, and he expanded the Persian Empire even farther. Under Darius, the Persian Empire hit one of its peak positions of power. And here's a great statistic. At one point under Darius, 40% of the world's population lived under the Persian Empire, which if you consider that statistic, the Persian Empire was, at its height under Darius, the largest empire in the history of the world. Not by terms of land size or land mass, but by population. 40% of the world's population lived under the Persian Empire. Under Darius, key innovation that he did was he had a standard for weights and measurements throughout his empire. There was a standard language under Darius as his empire expanded. So if you were living in Africa, or if you were living in India or the Middle East or Greece or wherever you were under the conquest of the Persians, you spoke a similar language. But also under the Persians, on Darius, there was the beginning of roads. The Royal Road was a road that the Persians built that extended all the way almost throughout their entire empire. And here's a good example of technology and innovation. To connect and unite such a large and growing population and empire, the Persians were unbelievable engineers. They built massive roads that extended all over their empire. And this was really one of the greatest contributions from Darius and future Persian emperors who really paved the way, pun totally intended there, paved the way for transportation, for travel, and then the big T, trade. The Persians gained a lot of wealth. Their economy roared thanks to the roads. Roads were the key for not only uniting Persia, not only helping its military, that's another important point of the roads, the military could get anywhere it needed to thanks to these roads, but especially the Royal Road was Persia's main vehicle for trade. I want to end, though, talking about two more sections when it comes to Persia. The first is religion. Over time, although most of Persians and most early civilizations were polytheistic, over time, a unique monotheistic religion developed from the Persian culture. And that, it's a tough one to say, it's a tongue twister, but the name of the religion, and I know I don't have it on the screen, so just try to do the best you can to sound spell it, maybe even look it up. But the name of the religion is Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism. And this is truly one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. Now, I think it's interesting I mentioned the Hebrews with their monotheistic Judaic religion. So around the same time as Judaism, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest monotheistic religion, you also have Zoroastrianism, which was the Persian monotheistic religion. So many Persians practiced Zoroastrianism. There was religious law. So Persia was a theocracy, which is one of those governments that has religion mixed together, theocracy. But Zoroastrianism is an old-time religion, and it's still practiced today in some parts of the world, especially modern-day Iran. And we already mentioned Cyrus, he took a very hands-off approach. He allowed and tolerated different religions in his empire. But no doubt, Zoroastrianism is an important term for religion in your G-Sprite chart. And so we'll end things here by talking about how Persia, although it lasted all the way into the 20th century, Persia eventually weakened significantly after Cyrus, after Darius. And a lot of those problems started with another Persian emperor named Xerxes. And Xerxes paid the ultimate price. His empire began to weaken because he got a little too greedy. Xerxes tried to invade many of the Greek city-states. He tried to go after Athens and Sparta, and he messed with a lot of territory in Greece. And that merely created a lot of controversy within the Greek city-states. In fact, the Greek city-states in the Greek-Persian War, they joined forces all together. Athens and Sparta came together and other smaller city-states, and they fought a major war against Persia. Major war against Persia. And this helped to really weaken the Persian Empire. So although Persia was at one point the mightiest empire, and their dynasty from Cyrus eventually to Darius and eventually to Xerxes, Persia eventually weakened significantly. And so another truism we're going to have in world history this year: empires rise and they fall. And although the Persian Empire would continue on, it would never again be the height that it was before its war with Greece. And that, you could argue, was really the beginning of the undoing of Persia's power as the main power in the Middle East and the main power in Europe and Africa. So I know I threw a lot at you, and I know I didn't have a lot of sources. You can use your notes tomorrow on the team trivia. That's the trade-off. So take whatever notes you want. We're going to bring these into group trivia tomorrow. I'm going to really perfect that group trivia, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you for watching. And if you're not a BOA student, I appreciate your patience as you sift through this and maybe gain some more understanding on the Persian Empire. So I'll end this, as always, with a reminder: the past shapes the future. Take care, everyone. We'll see you in class tomorrow.